Hi there, I'm Kelly Wilder. I'm one of the librarians here at St. Philip's College, and what we're going to do today is do a quick tutorial that covers all the information that you need to succeed with your library project for EDUC 1300. So if you'll give me just a moment here, I'll share my screen with you so you can follow along, and we'll get you those tips and tricks you need to be successful. So let's see. All right, so we're looking here at the St. Philip's College website. And from here, you can get to the library by simply clicking on these three bars that say menu. So we're going to click on there. Then we're going to click right here where it says library. And that gets us to the library homepage. Now, from the library homepage, you can do a lot of things. You can click this Ask Us button. So if you watch this tutorial and you're still lost or confused or you don't remember anything, if you click on this Ask Us button, you can immediately correspond with the librarian who will help you get through this process. So there's still help even if this video doesn't do it for you. Now, there is a LibGuide that has been created specifically for this assignment. And the way you get to those is if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see library resources, and you're going to click right here where it says LibGuides. And here come our LibGuides. And then what we're going to do is we're going to type in EDUC library project. And we're going to hit search. And you'll see right now it says assignment on the EDUC library project, evaluating information on the EDUC library project, gathering information. All of these are part of the same one. So if you just click right here where it says EDUC library project, that's going to get you to the page for your assignment. So this explains a little bit about the library, what our hours are, and how to get help. There's a quick homepage tutorial. There's a thing on asking for help at the library. So it's some basic library information for you. And again, that lib chat right here where you can get help is right here again in the side pocket. So you can get immediate assistance from us if you need it. Over here on the tabs, this is kind of the navigation for your project. So you're going to click on assignment. And this explains what you're expected to do. So in this particular assignment, you will participate in a library presentation. You're going to pick a topic, and you're going to research that topic from the 1960s and 1970s, and then research your same topic from the 80s and 90s. And then you'll end up writing a comparison to identify two significant changes that occurred. So we'll talk a little bit about what you need to go through. So you're going to go through basically the cycle of information. So next we have understanding information needs. This explains the information cycle to you and how information changes over time. Because as human beings, we're always gathering information. And of course, as we get information, it changes. So right now we see things that say like the day of, so this is what happened, like the day an event happened. So as soon as it happens, right, we start seeing things like blog, people are twittering about things. Maybe they're making Facebook posts. A few news outlets are getting out quick and dirty articles on things, but they're not necessarily fully researched yet. A lot of times they'll say things like, we haven't been able to get comment yet from so-and-so, or we don't know about this yet, or things are still developing. So that's what happens immediately that first day. And they're kind of constantly gathering information. You'll notice the news is changing rapidly. And as the week goes by, you start getting more and more articles in newspapers like the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal. You start seeing more things develop, and the articles start getting a little more streamlined into what the truth is, and they start exploring things like the ramifications of an event. And then you start seeing things over the course of the next week. Things start showing up in popular magazines, Time, Rolling Stone, U.S. News and World Report, things like that, where you start getting people usually taking certain angles, not just reporting direct information, but taking certain angles on the information they have. And then many months later, usually at least 6 months to 12 months, 13 months, you start seeing academic journals and articles. And these are articles that are considered more authoritative because they're written by experts in those fields. So like while you might be hearing things about the election right now and over again, all these different things going on, after the election, 6 months, people will start talking about perhaps the politics of the election, how information is transferred. And depending on what fields these people are in, they might be taking different angles. So someone who is a professor of public policy might talk about specific policies and how those ran up to the election and how those have changed since the election. Somebody who is maybe a communications or media professor would talk about the way email was used to win the election, or how different types of social media were used to influence the vote, things like that. And these people are experts in the field. They have PhDs where they're heavily focused in that area. And so these sources are considered to be more authoritative because, one, written by experts, and two, that aspect of time and research has gone into ensuring that they have the best information that's actually contributing to the knowledge in the field. And then a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, you start seeing books and government publications pop up. These things take more time to write. They take more time to publish. They're more heavily vetted. And then, of course, many, many years later, you start seeing these things showing up in reference books and encyclopedias and almanacs, things like that. So information has a life cycle that's kind of constantly moving. So you have to pay attention to that, because when you're assessing whether or not the information you're getting is accurate or authoritative, part of that will depend on where in the process that information cycle is. Now, as we scroll down, we'll also talk about how to tell the difference between scholarly and popular articles. The things make different. I talked about that just a little bit before, but here, this will give you more in-depth information. And of course, there's a nice video here where you can understand how the peer review process works in scholarly journals. Now, when you get through this part of the process, you can click where it says gathering information here, or you can scroll back up to the top and use this navigation bar and go to gathering information. And that'll get you to the next part of this project. So this talks about how do you pick your topic for research. Remember, you're going to be picking a topic that would be relevant as early as the 1960s. So you're probably not going to talk about Facebook, because there was no Facebook in the 1960s, right? But you might talk about, say, Rolling Stone magazine and how it changed from the 1960s to the 1980s and the 1990s. Or you might talk about fashion or technology in general, computer technology, how it changed. So there's a lot of possibilities you can do. So this talks a little bit about how to pick that research topic, to narrow it down into something that you can do for a paper of this size. Remember, in the grand scheme of things, this is a fairly small paper, so you're going to need a fairly narrow topic, or you won't be able to say a whole lot that's very meaningful. They'll also talk about how to find good sources for that topic once you meet it. One of the big mistakes that a lot of students make, and certainly when I made a lot when I was first learning to research, was you go into research looking for that one perfect source, something that almost mirrors exactly the title of your research paper, or the title of what the idea you have in your head of where you want your research to go. That's not usually how you end up finding articles. You have to be willing to pull out the key words and realize that you're going to find multiple articles, and they will contribute to your final paper in different ways. So you're not going to find one source that addresses all of your questions. You're going to find multiple sources and use them. This explains a little bit about how to do that. This next video will talk about getting better at selecting and using keywords. And then we'll start getting into how to use our databases. For this particular assignment, using a database like Academic Search Complete makes the most sense. And this little tutorial here will go through how to do that. And then, of course, there's another one about using the St. Philip's Library Catalog if you want to find books. And another one that goes a little further and explaining how computers aren't very smart in reality. They are. They're only as smart as we are. So we're going to click down here, go into evaluating information, because we talked about how you're gathering information. That'll be the next step. But after that, you want to look at the sources and make sure that the information you got is of good quality. Make sure that it is worthy of being used in an academic paper. So this first one will talk about how to use Google effectively. So if you don't end up finding things directly in the library databases, how you would go out into Google and find sources and make sure that you're getting good ones. Next one talks about the CRAP test, which goes into how you evaluate information. So usually like a little acronym. The C is for currency, the R is for relevance, A is for authority, next A is for accuracy, and the last P is for purpose. And this explains exactly what those different topics mean and how you're going to use that to evaluate a piece of information that you've taken in. And then we'll talk about using information ethically. So you'll click here on this next tab. And this will explain to you a little bit about what plagiarism is, how you avoid plagiarism. And one of the main things to take away from this, I know a lot of college students early on, and myself included when I was early in college, think that they're supposed to be generating all these original thoughts. And so if they use a lot of sources and credit all these sources, it'll sound like they didn't have any thoughts. But when you're doing initial research, you're not an expert yet, you're just learning. And so it's expected that you're going to be citing experts in the field, that you're going to be going out and finding information. And the biggest thing that you have to do just to make sure that you don't get accused of plagiarism is just give credit to the source that you used. And this will explain how you do that, you know, when you need to do that, and just some basic things on different styles, because of course we can't just It would be so much easier if we all had just one way of showing our sources, but we don't. There are different citation styles that want you to do things different ways. For this particular class, you're going to use what's called the APA citation style. And if you scroll down just a little bit further here, it shows you how to use that. So that'll give you a little bit of help going forward with this assignment so that when you're writing your paper, you cite your sources properly and you don't get, you don't lose points on that or get into trouble for plagiarism. And when you get finished that, you'll fill out this little quiz. And then of course you'll get to searching on your project and hopefully you will have a good time with that. Again, if you do find yourself having difficulty, don't hesitate to contact us at the library. That is what we do. That's what we enjoy about our jobs. So please reach out to us. We will help you. And good luck with your project. Have a great day.